Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Tell you what, it's a beautiful day, even though it's gray. Oh, sorry about that. Me and Mike. I'm always in trouble with Mike. I want us to go back to the thoughts that we had that Jake presented for the Lord's Supper. You know, if it weren't for the fact that I already have a title up here, I think I'd just change what I want to talk about this morning and talk about that. But I do want to start what I'm going to say with the thoughts that Jake brought up in Philippians chapter 4. Let me read. I want to start in verse 4, and I want to read on down through verse 8. It says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. You know, that even means in this lost and dying world that we live in, it means rejoice in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. And there's a reason for rejoicing, because all of this doesn't apply to us if we have the right attitude. He says, let your gentle spirit be known to all men. This is one of those places where I wish it had been translated differently, because gentle really doesn't carry the thought that is in this verse. This thought of gentle here means forbearing, or actually underbearing. This is the kind of thing that means you're able to stand up under the load. It's like pillars under a building. It says, let your bearing up under spirit be known to all men. Why? The Lord is near. He says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. There are different levels of prayer that he's talking about here. Prayer is when you just speak to the Lord, but supplication is when you are pleading. Please. How many times do you say please in your prayers? Do you approach God the same way you teach your children to approach anything that they want? Do you ask them, do you tell them to always say please and then say thank you? Because that's what is involved in this. This is not only are we recognizing God, but we're pleading. How much of your prayer is pleading? When you really think you need something, do you change the level of request from, I want this, to please, please? So he says, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God. Now, I want you to pay attention to this peace right here. Because this would be, in Hebrew, would be the same thing that we're going to read about here, or that Michael did read when David sent those shearers to Nabal. He says, peace be to your, and your, and your. That was something that was so important to the Hebrew people, that word shalom. It's how they greet one another. And it doesn't mean just absence of war. It means may everything about yours be what it should be. It's this absolute tranquility and paradise in your life. So he says, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Then he says this, finally, brethren. I love the way Paul finishes a thought, because he will always give you evidence, and then he'll say, finally. I want you to put this as the wrapping on this package. Finally, whatever is pure, or whatever is true. Everything's got to be based on truth, folks. Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Not part of the truth, not a piece of it, not one part of it, and everything else like you would like for it to be. We can't identify as the truth. It has to be the truth. He says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable. You know, we know. We know whether something is honorable or not. We know whether we respect a deed or an action or not. We know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's why the laws of life have never changed from the beginning of time. Every set of laws that have been from the very beginning of recorded history have been the same. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't change the boundaries. Don't do this. Don't do that, because everybody knows the difference between right and wrong. You have to be taught out of that. So he says, whatever is right, whatever is pure. You know what pure is? You know what unadulterated is? Do you know what it means to, let me tell you a little story. I was born into something other than either poverty or richness. I was kind of born right about in the middle, with a kind of toward the poverty end of it, but my grandparents lived in poverty. My great-grandparents. My uncle was a farmer, and though he was rich, you would never know it by the way he lived, because he was a frugal man. I went out with him to milk the cows when I was about 4 or 5 years old. But I can remember it vividly, because this old cow that he had, it was a Jersey cow, and she gave a lot of cream, which they use for butter, and we had the job of making the butter. We had a unique way of doing it in a mason jar. You roll the mason jar back and forth across the floor, and pretty soon you've got butter in there. But I want to talk about the milking process, because Uncle Elvoy, that's a unique name, and Elvoy. Who names their kid Elvoy? Nobody anymore, but they did back then. Uncle Elvoy was a man's man. He was a war hero. He came back home to Florida, and he built an empire. He had thousands of acres. We had this old cow at that time, and he took me out to help him milk. So he said, son, you sit right there on that stool and don't move, because she can be a little violent at times, especially if my hands are cold. So he goes up to her, and he warms his hands up, and he washes his hands in a bucket, and then he sits down with a bucket under her, and he starts milking. Every once in a while, he'd turn one up, and he'd squirt it at me, and I'd laugh and have fun, and then he'd just keep milking. And pretty soon, the bucket was about half full, and she got tired of him pulling on her, so she kicked. And when she kicked, her foot came back and landed in the bucket. There was floaties in the bucket. And you know what was floating in the bucket? It's what she dropped on the floor, along with some hay and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, there goes the bucket of milk. Nah. Remember I said Uncle Elvoy was frugal? That meant he took a burlap sack and he put it over another bucket, and he filtered out the floaties that were in the bucket. At 4 years old, I kind of had an idea that all of it didn't get filtered out. So I was a little hesitant to drink that milk with the microscopic floaties in it, because I didn't think I wanted any of that. So Paul says, I want you to think about whatever is pure. We know what's pure and what's not. We have an instinctive ability to know the difference between something that's contaminated and something that's pure, if we have any information about it. He says, whatever is lovely. Things are either beautiful or they're not, you know. Very few things are just nothing. They have an effect on us. They either make us smile or they don't. He says, whatever is of good repute. Paul deals with this in another book where he says, those who were of reputation meant nothing to me, for God shows no partiality. Reputation. What people are seen to be, what people are understood to be by others. Whatever is of good repute. Something that people don't go at when they hear about it. Something that makes people want to trust you. That's what good repute is. He says, whatever is, if there is any excellence, and we talked about excellence, and that's what this milk and the cream thing is. The cream excels to the top of the milk, and then you use it to make butter. Excellence means rising above. That's what we're supposed to do as Christians. We rise above this world. Or we don't. Last week we talked about your face in the mud, and you can suck mud and go deeper, or you can excel and you can get out of the mud and be the kind of person God wants us to be. He says, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, I just don't even like this system that we have in the world today where everybody gets a trophy. That stinks. Because you need to deserve a trophy to get a trophy. What the Lord is saying here is do something worthy of praise, or think about being worthy of praise, because Daniel did not get that reputation he had in heaven by being average. O man of high esteem, God said about Daniel. That's not me saying about Daniel, not Daniel saying it about Daniel, it's God saying it about Daniel. And that's what matters, is God saying it about us. That's what the Beatitudes are about. The Beatitudes is, blessed are the poor in spirit. Starts off with that. Blessed are the people who realize they can't do it on their own. That is God saying, I like you because you recognize this. Now, he goes on here. He says, if there is anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. That's a wonderful thought. Because like Jake said, we are what we think about. We are what we eat. And what we're talking about here is devouring, making a part of ourself what Jesus did. Dwelling on that magnificent gift, and then being willing to imitate that in our lives. Thank you for that thought, buddy. That was magnificent. Amen. Now I want us to go to another passage. I want us to, and I'm not going to read it, I'm just going to talk about it, and y'all can read it yourselves. I want to talk about the story of Nabal. What a name. You ever heard of that name? Nabal. That's this man that David sent his men to meet there at Carmel. Carmel, if you've ever seen a picture of the land of Israel, there's this little horn, this little rock horn that sticks out into the Mediterranean Sea, and it's the highest place it's where the pass of Megiddo is. It's where Armageddon is supposed to be. It is this, as one British general said in the First World War, this has to be the bloodiest square mile of earth on earth. Because it's where all the battles were fought, from armies coming from the north to the south or from the south to the north. It's where everybody decided they had to control that area. Well, this man owns it. This man, Nabal, how many of you, raise your hand, if you would name your kids something like idiot? Would you do that? Raise your hand if you're going to name your next child idiot. How about doofus? Let's just tone it down a little bit and say, I'm going to name my son Doofus. How about fool? Would you name your child Fool? I can't imagine any parent, anytime, anywhere on this earth naming their child Fool. But that's what this word is. This word Nabal means fool. Now that's what he's called in this picture that we have, this picture that is being painted for us by the writer of Samuel. It's telling us that this man was known as fool. He was rich. He was rich, and he was married to a very intelligent, beautiful woman. I wonder how he got her. Because it says that he was harsh and he was evil in his dealings. This man didn't care about anybody. But he was married to this beautiful, intelligent woman. Is that what we're impressed with this woman about? She was beautiful and she was intelligent? Which one of those two is the most important? Well, yeah, you can make it on intelligence. You sure can. And you can make it on beauty. But what if you got both? Beauty and intelligence. Whoa, what an advantage this woman has. But she's married to fool. Kind of have an idea this was an arranged marriage? That daddy set this up for her to be married to this man, and daddy got the money and she stuck with fool? She's stuck with fool. David recognizes this man as a wealthy landowner. Now David is running from Saul. This is a bad part of David. Well, actually, it's a bad part of David's life, but it's one of the best. Because this demonstrates the character of this man David that God loved so much. David sends 10 of his men. Said, go to Nabal, because this rich man later on, when David is king, David can send and take whatever he wants. But right now, David is running from Saul. He has already been proclaimed king by God. But David said, I will not set my hand against the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to kill Saul. I will wait until God takes him out of the way, and then I will be king. But it kind of demonstrates the character of King David. So David sends to Nabal and he says, hey, can you help my boys out? Because we've been guarding your sheep and we've been guarding your people, and we haven't let anything happen to them. Nabal says, who are you? Who are you, David, that you send men to me? Am I supposed to take my food and give it to people I don't even know where they came from? Now, there was a rumor, there was a thing going around Israel. Actually, it was a song that was sung by the women in every village. And the song went something like this. I don't know the tune, but I'll tell you the words. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. And this song just kept being repeated over and over and over. And it made Saul so angry. Because David was getting 10 times the glory he was getting. And Saul just couldn't stand it. Even though he already knows, because God's already told him, you're no longer king. I'm going to put David in your place. And he does everything he can to kill David. Everything he can. But David, there was a time when David and his men were hiding. They were hiding in a cave. David had his men back in the recesses of the cave. Now this is going to get a little messy here, but bear with me. And Saul has to go to the bathroom. King Saul has to go to the bathroom. So he has his men wait, and he goes into this cave and he sits on a rock to take care of his business. Well, his robe is flowing out behind the rock. And David's men say, hey, let's get him. While he's sitting there, let's get him. And David says, I'm not going to kill him. I'm not going to lay my hand against the Lord's anointed. Get behind me, Satan, kind of is what he's saying to his men. But he does sneak up there behind King Saul, and he cuts off a portion of his robe. And Saul finishes his job, and he goes back out there to the rest of his men. And David waits till he gets a kind of a distance away. Then he comes out and he stands on a rock and he holds up the piece of his robe. He says, see what I could have done to you if I did not have your best interest at heart? He waves that in Saul's face. All that does is enrage Saul. So this is the scenario that we have with David running from this angry king who shouldn't even be king. And David is still trying to do the right thing. So Nabal says, get out of here. I'm not giving that rebel anything. So they go back and they tell King David. Now remember, David has killed his 10,000s, and David is absolutely fearless. As a boy, he went out and he grabbed a lion by the beard and killed it when it had one of his sheep. Smote it by grabbing it by the beard and killing it. I don't think I want to fight David. He did the same thing with a bear. Have you ever seen a bear when it's angry? I saw a video of somebody shooting a Alaska brown bear from a long distance, and the bear was down kind of in a hollow, and there were trees about this big that were growing up around this little hollow that the bear was in. And when he shot that thing, he shot it with a big, powerful rifle, that bear jumped up and it started swiping at everything. Those trees that big were coming up out of the ground, and that bear was just frothing at the mouth. I can't imagine anybody grabbing that bear and killing it with his hands. But David did. I'm going to kind of give him a wide berth. But Nabal, the fool, Nabal doesn't have that. Nabal doesn't have any wisdom. He's a fool. He's named fool. Here's what I think happened. I think whatever his name was when he was born, they changed when they wrote the story. They changed it to Nabal the fool. So what happens is, these men go back and they tell David, he insulted us. He's not going to give us anything. David said, strap on your 6 guns, boys. We're going to get him. And they went to get him. But in the process now, this beautiful, intelligent woman, beautiful, intelligent, this woman was not only beautiful and intelligent, she was the kind of woman that whatsoever things are true, lovely, honorable, right, these are the things she thought about. When her men came back, or when her husband's men came back and came to her, and they didn't go to him, they came to her and told her what they said, or what they were told to say. And she says, okay, pack up your stuff. And they packed up food and wine and all kinds of things that David and his men might need. And she loads them on donkeys, and she sets out to get there before David gets to her house, because she knows what's going to happen if David and his men get there before she gets to them. Everybody and everything that she holds dear not her husband, but everything else that she holds dear is going to be eliminated. Because David is mad. The same one that killed the bear, the same one that killed the lion, the same one that killed Goliath is angry. And he's coming to town. So this beautiful, intelligent, godly woman. Oh, let's turn that around. This godly, beautiful, intelligent woman. Heavy, heavy on the godly. Goes out to meet David. And she says, please forgive my husband. He's a fool. Now, what is it that's most important about this woman? The beauty? There's a lot of beautiful women, but I'll tell you what. You find a beautiful woman who has an evil heart. You find an intelligent woman who has an evil heart. You find a godly woman who has both of those things. What Solomon said, when you find a good wife, when a man finds a good wife, he's got a good thing. I'm telling you, what was so good about Abigail is first her respect for God. Her respect for God and for what is good, what is right, what is honorable, what is true, what is pure. That's what made her such a good woman. It's why David, after Nabal is taken out of the picture by the Lord, David takes her to be his wife. He could not let that godly, beautiful, intelligent woman get away. So what do we hold as important when we're looking for a wife? I'll tell you what I'm looking for. What I looked for and what I found is a godly woman who is beautiful and intelligent, who loves me and is willing to die for me.
That's right.
Let's think about what's important in life. Let's not focus on the passing things like beauty, because I don't care who you are. If you start off beautiful, you're not going to end up that way if you live long and long and long. Beauty is a fleeting thing. Intelligence has no bearing on anything when you get Alzheimer's. Intelligence doesn't even matter anymore. But godliness is, it's more important the day you die than the day you're born. It's what God smiles at, because godly doesn't mean being like God. It means having the right attitude toward God. It means loving God. I was looking for a woman who would say something like, I want someone who loves God as much as I do. I found her. Why don't we change the way we look at life? Why don't we change the way we perceive importance in this world? Beauty? I say, but I want beauty too, but I don't want beauty without the most important things. I want intelligence, but I don't want it without the godliness that will temper it. If you know what's wrong in your life, if you know there are things you need to do to change your life, to become a godly person, whether how much intelligence you have or how much beauty you have doesn't really matter, because it's the godliness that is So important.
Amen.
Make your life right today. Won't you come while we stand and sing the song that Ron has for us?